It's good to see everybody. We are going to have some recap of our session last week, and I like to call it a possibility thinking session. I know the business world likes to call it brainstorming, and I've participated in a very well-organized brainstorming program with the San Antonio Chamber of Commerce many years ago. And so I had some experience with that. It's always a little bit risky, but I want to tell you, I compiled all of the ideas and thoughts that everyone shared last week, and they're on that handout in front of you. And some of them are, if you'll notice in the top section, I have 3 lines there that are underlined. Those are some of the ideas that came from the discussion last week. The other items there that are the dark bullet points are the things that were already on the list just to stimulate thinking, and these follow kind of along with them and are expansion of those. One of the reasons that we talk about possibility is in your thinking about what you're going to do, what you might be able to do in serving, is thinking without judgment. And somewhere in here I have a slide right there, and I put it up last week and didn't mention it, but this needs to be when you put your mind in this place to think about what kind of things might I be able to do. You need to be in a no judgment zone, which means don't judge your own ideas. And that's the thing they started out with when you have a possibility thinking session or a brainstorming session is don't judge the ideas, just get them out there. And y'all did a magnificent job last week in doing that. As you can see from the list here, the things that could be done that we could open our building up to and help to make it a community center for this area of San Antonio go from the middle of the page all the way to the bottom. Lots of those. You'll notice that at the end of some of those suggestions, I have numbers in parentheses, and those are the number of times people put down that item or something in that same category on their various lists that we compiled. One of them is the Zumba class, and Glenda had suggested to me before when I was starting to work on this, that would be something we could do and host here at the building. And you'll notice that I had put, and we talked about it and said, well, maybe we just put, rather than Zumba, we put something generic and say ladies exercise class. Well, now I'm learning that Zumba is more than just for ladies as well, and it covers all age groups. Well, you'll notice there's a 3 out there in parentheses. Literally, there are 3 sheets of paper from last week that have Zumba written on them, where the 3 different folks suggested, Zumba class. It may have been more than that, but these came from groups, and so at least 3 different groups in here. And we even have one person who says she can lead those. And so that's how this kind of possibility thinking session works. This is how God's Spirit works in our lives to get us led where He knows we need to be going. Well, last week we talked about how do we find and apply the personal gifts to serve and looking for our place of service. And so that's what the possibility thinking session was about, is to get all kind of ideas out there, and then by compiling these and handing them back to you, this is a take-home sheet, and I encourage you to do that, because you can look through there and guess what's going to happen? Who can tell me?
I don't think I can do that.
You think you can think I can do that. What else is going to happen?
Gives you better ideas.
Exactly. Stimulates more ideas. As if we don't have enough to keep us busy for a while, folks. This list of things that could be hosted right here in our building, recognize we have to start small. We can't just bite all this off at one time. For one thing, we've got to coordinate with local agencies and entities and things to do. The other thing that's fascinating is I have since the beginning served on the safety ministry as well. And our son volunteered to lead that, and he's been the chairman of that committee or group or ministry since we put it together about 3 years ago. And he keeps asking for who's going to take it over and do it afterwards, and I keep my mouth shut because somebody else, needs to step up and do that. But our son John is a lieutenant with the fire department, and he spent about 5 years on the ambulance as a paramedic as well. And so he was well qualified to talk about all of the health and safety kind of things. Some of these, for instance, having an active shooter class, training class, or active shooter response training, was also, you notice, had 3 different suggestions there coming from 3 different groups. And again, I didn't want to put that on the course because it may give the wrong messages to folks. And so the technical term in police and safety areas or career fields is mass casualty event. And so that's what I put on the sheet. But then I came back with three suggestions for an active shooter training. We've already talked to the Bexar County Sheriff's Office before COVID hit, and we're discussing with them having a class like that here in our building. They're always looking for venues, and they put these on and go in frequently church buildings, and then they publicize it to the community. And that's one of the big advantages for us doing things here in our building and offering that to other people. One of the things that came back was the bloodmobile. Well, we have the bloodmobile that comes for our members to go out and donate blood on a regular basis. But we haven't publicized that to the local community. And so that's something we're going to look at doing. We'll invest a little bit of our money in the local outreach ministry's budget to make sure that we're getting that information out to the local community so other people would know that on Sunday morning, this Sunday of the month, you can come and donate blood. And we become known here at Northside as a community service oriented location and group of people. But the next thing we talked about as we've gone through this, to kind of recap, in finding our place of service, is to pray about it and to ask God to guide us to where He knows we need to be. And as David talked some this morning about preparing and being ready to answer questions, that's kind of part of it. We need to do that. We also need to be ready and looking for the answers to those prayers that God sends our way. And I will tell you, I'm going to tell a story here in just a minute. I will tell you that kind of emphasizes that you need to be ready because God's not always going to answer the prayer in exactly the way you think He will. I see a lot of heads nodding on that one. In fact, my personal feeling is, from a lot of you that I've talked to and many other people over the years, it will come differently than what we expect. And so part of that means, and this goes back to what David was talking about, we need to be ready to respond to the answer God provides us in the way that He provides it, not in the way we envision it. And so that brings 2 things. When you're praying, we don't want to be praying for something really, really tightly specific. You can certainly do that. Nothing wrong with that. But be aware that God may say, you want that, but I want this. And so if you'll do this, then you'll get what you asked for in the first place, just in a different way. I have a good friend who was here at Northside for a while. We taught Bible classes together and had similar businesses in the construction and real estate development fields, and went through a period of time that business got pretty difficult after the 1986 tax law was passed, and everything depended on savings and loan financing, and you may notice that savings and loans don't exist anymore, and that was a direct result of that. Well, he was covered up with his business and just spending months focusing on that and not really doing anything other than attending services. And so it had been bothering him, and he shared this with me over a period of time years ago. One Sunday morning, he came into class, sat down in the back of the class. His wife was taking care of nursery. And he just had a prayer. He talked to God and said, I need to be doing something. Let me know what you want me to do. And he said, after about 2 minutes, class started, and Tina Wharton and Dawn Rodriguez, who's not here anymore, but she worked with Tina, kind of like Coco did for years, in the children's ministry, came in and put on a commercial because the next quarter was about to start and they were in desperate need of 2 or 3 more teachers for children. Now, my friend had never taught children, only adults. And he said, okay. I don't think I could get much more clear an answer than that. But I tell you that to illustrate, it may come in a different way than you expect. But he stepped out and he said, okay, my wife knows how to do this because she does it all the time, and so I'll get her to help me. So he went out and talked to Tina and Dawn after class and said, okay, I'm here. 4-year-olds. He said, I was terrified. But he made it through, made some fascinating relationships with these little kids, and loved it. Didn't do it again, but loved it. Served, and so... Yes, sir?
Volunteering is the season in your life that you're doing. I mean, you can volunteer for one thing, a couple years down the pike, you can volunteer for something different. Now, contrary to popular opinion, parents sometimes volunteer for the safety thing. But not all things is that way. I mean, you can be involved in a ministry for 2 or 3 years or a year, and then try something else if you feel that. So I think people think what you're doing is wrong, and you're really not. You're really not. And you shouldn't be. You know what I'm saying?
Well, and you have given me a great segue to the next thing, and that is, I'm going to skip ahead a little bit. Look at the bottom point here. Be aware your first place may not be your longer term spot. It's okay to try out things. God, and here's the other part, and this struck me as I was preparing the lesson because this wasn't what I was going to say in the beginning. I was thinking of it from, our personal perspective. God may motivate you to go and serve in a ministry, and you do it for a little while, and it's not the fit for you. But what you may not ever know is God may have needed you to go and serve in that ministry for a brief period of time to come in contact with someone else who you needed to influence in a way that God knew they needed. And when you think about it from that perspective, that kind of gets back to what Jesus talked about in 1 Timothy 2, the self-emptying passage, where we take up our cross, we die to ourselves to serve Him, which fits with what David was talking about today. It's about what does He want us to do, not what do we want to do. And so finding the right place. And one thing you have the promise of, and that is wherever you serve, God will use you as His instrument to benefit other people, and you will be blessed by it. So even though you may not think, like my friend, he didn't think he'd ever teach 4-year-olds, but once he did it, he realized that he was blessed in that experience as well. And as you can tell, I've gotten completely out of the sequence here. But let's look at the next thing. Look at the small things on this list that you can do. There's small things in our children's ministries in the in the youth and the children's ministries that can be done. And let's look at how significant this is for Jesus. In Mark 10:13 through 16, people were bringing little children to Jesus for him to place his hands on them, but the disciples rebuked them. When Jesus saw this, he was indignant. He said to them, "Let the little children come to me and do not hinder them, for the kingdom of God belongs to such as these. Truly I tell you, anyone who will not receive the kingdom of God like a little child will never enter it." And he took the children in his arms, placed his hands on them, and blessed them. Jesus values children extremely highly. And that's a message for us. And I will promise you one thing. If you're not sure about something, you can go and talk to the Cranes or talk to Coco, Nicole Sargent in children's ministry, and ask them if there are things you can do and talk about what possibilities are. There isn't a ministry leader or minister in this church or any other church in America that is going to not want volunteers. And you've heard of the 80-20 rule, and I think that may apply to secular organizations, but it shouldn't apply to the church, because there's a mission for all of us to be involved and to do that. And so we can kind of set that one aside. Not that doesn't occur, but our goal here in talking about being missional is to go past that so that everybody's involved at least at some level in doing something. So let's look at the handout and look at some of these things, because this is where we can continue on our own to think about all of the various things that can be done. Now, I'm going to go back to something I said a couple of 3 weeks ago, and that was, and then had to come back and retract last week, about if you've got an idea for something, you need to be prepared to work in it. To some of these things, that is true. If you've got an idea for some sort of a ministry that is pretty significant, and there are a few on this list, as you can see, or an event that you know about that could be done in our building that we could offer it, it would be helpful if you would bring that to us and talk about how to do that, what the organization is, how to contact them. It doesn't take a lot of work, but at least it would be doing the research to make the contacts, communicate, and find out, do they need space? How would they handle that? How often, and that sort of thing, because we've got a calendar of all of the uses of the building here that the office keeps, and then it's a matter of coordinating. So that's part of in serving in that area, would be to help in that way. After that, it gets down to doing things to help organize it and host it, and maybe meet the group up here that's going to come. And even if you're not attending in that group or participating, it might mean coordinating with the office to be here and available to bring people in and show them around and show them where the restrooms are and that sort of thing, or set tables up and arrange for that to be done. None of those are real difficult. So as you begin to think about things like that, those are components of all of that is part of serving and doing this. And so it covers a broad spectrum. Some of the things we've talked about in the safety ministry are the CPR and Stop the Bleed courses. Also, what was suggested, and we haven't talked about that in the safety ministry, is self-defense classes for ladies and young people. And part of that, for instance, as an example, is helping people begin to develop an awareness that is automatic and habitual of what's going on around you. Because frequently what we have happen is people are going through life and out in public and oblivious, and somebody with nefarious intent comes along and tries to assault them or mug them or kidnap them or something, and that's because they weren't paying attention. They didn't realize it. And so developing this awareness is part of safety issues. I spent several years in property management, managing apartment communities and a large management company. And almost universally, our staffs on the sites are women. The maintenance people are mostly male, and the managers and office staff and leasing agents are almost all women. And at that time, this was in the early 90s, there was a rapist going around who was attacking apartment managers. And from that, they came up with a thing where you bring your driver's license and we keep it in the office until you come back. I have stories to tell you would never like to hear about that, but we had to train all of our people to begin to develop an awareness. And also, we had to start looking at things like, where's the lighting on the building? Do we have dark corridors and breezeways that don't have proper lighting in them? And making sure that we have the right things so that we don't have dark areas where people, all people, would be going through that they might be subject to being attacked. There's lots of little things like that that come into play when you want to talk about those kind of things. And those are the kind of things that can be done to help people develop an awareness. The other thing is, I also spent about 11 years as a mortgage broker, and I dealt with lots and lots of people who had credit problems and difficulties. And we're beginning to realize that in the country now, but us providing all sorts of things. This was suggested by a number of people: budgeting, financial planning, financial management, just teaching people how to handle a checking account and to get credit and to manage credit. I've known people that graduated from college that came to work for me right out of college, and their parents were all, don't get any debt, don't get any debt. Moved here to San Antonio, couldn't rent an apartment because they had zero credit history. And I said, you're going to have to go get a credit account. Most college students get offers from credit card companies to open a credit card. He didn't take any of those. We had told our kids, you need to do that. Get one or two at least. You begin to build a credit file. His first reaction was, yeah, but then I'm going to have to pay interest on stuff, or I'm going to have to pay an annual fee. Yes, you are. That's part of that education and training that so many people don't even know. And it's sad, but we've got an awful lot of opportunity. And I will tell you, there's in the 175,000 people that live around us, there's lots of them that don't know how to manage their money. They own homes, they have mortgages and cars and car payments. They don't know how to handle a budget, and they don't know how to plan. And we can be a benefit to them in doing that in a number of ways. Let's look at the SAFE ministry. This is one that Rebecca Light is leading, and she is on vacation right now. But in a couple of weeks, when she gets back, she is committed to come and talk to us a little bit more about this. We already did something connected with this about 3 weeks ago, where we had cards we wrote to the people who are the caseworkers that go into the homes where they've gotten calls about abusive situations with children. And they talked about how difficult that was, that most of the people in those jobs are only there a year. I cannot imagine people doing that. Praise God that there are people who are willing to do that and to try that and to take it on. The longevity in that job is very short, and so we were writing cards to encourage those folks. That's a simple thing, and we've talked about cards in here before, and writing cards, that's something that any of us can do easily and bring those in and have those delivered to the people through whatever venue we need. The other thing is, if we look at all of the different things that Rebecca put together, and Rebecca did an awesome job last year when we were doing our website for updating all of the missions pages, and this is right off of the missions page on our website for the SAFE ministry. And you can see some of the things that can be done. The first day bags, the back to school supplies, Christmas gifts. These are things, obviously, back to school supplies and Christmas gifts and prom dresses are things that only happen one time a year. And so, to be able to help just briefly in that area can be beneficial and a blessing to somebody. Then the other things that can be done that go on a longer term basis than that, things like the diapers and stuff, car seats that can be bought and put into a vault at Child Protective Services, because I've had just enough contact with them to know. I had a client when I was in the mortgage business that worked with them a lot, just on an ad hoc basis, and she would get calls in the middle of the night, and she had a little charity that she ran, and she would get calls in the middle of the night from somebody at Child Protective Services. They had taken a child out of a home, out of an abusive situation, and you think they've plucked them out, they've taken them to a state facility or a city-run facility, and what do they do with them? They need clothes, they need encouragement, they need somebody to show that they care about them. They would call her, and she'd get up in the middle of the night and go down there. And she would sit with the kids and work with them, but she kept on her own a supply of things in her own garage where she could take packages and have it and just, start giving it to the kids. They'd tell her, this child is this age, this size, whatever, and that. So I know that those things exist. I don't know all the detail about it, but that's the kind of thing Rebecca will share with us in a couple of weeks. The next thing is, when we look at it, becoming a certified babysitter, there's a process we go through for almost anything that we do with children. I don't know if y'all are aware. Let me see a show of hands. How many of you are aware that if you're going to work with the children's ministry and with the youth ministry, you need to have a background check? Okay, everybody knows that. Didn't want to go on assuming everybody did and not mention it, but that's all part of the things that we do to keep everyone safe on both sides, both the people who are serving and the people who are being served. And so Child Protective Services, anything you do with kids, that's going to be one of the requirements, including if you're babysitting for the siblings of a foster child or a child that's in the home in the process of being adopted, where the parents need to go and have a meeting with at the court, or they need to have a meeting with Child Protective Services or somebody else. And in addition to that, they need to have a night off. And so then it's taking care of all the kids in the home. And maybe babysitting could be done again. It's something that might be able to be done in a group setting up here. I don't know that. I'm just, this is the kind of thing that you can think about, and people that know more about that might come up with additional ideas and suggestions. The other things that can happen, and this is regular but not all the time, is taking people a meal once in a while, mowing the lawn and picking up groceries, for instance, and that even more so now, where the grocery stores have call and do the order and then get it delivered or have it picked up. There's all kinds of things like this that can be done. The other thing is, and we've had on our open table ministry that is kind of dormant right now because we don't have anybody that's working in it, where we had people that would work with the kids who are aging out. They're turning 18 and they're no longer eligible, but they may have been in foster care and not been adopted for quite some period of time, and now they're thrust out into the adult world, and they don't know all these life skills. They may not have had the opportunity to have been taught them because they've moved from one foster home to another. We don't know the situations. And so there are mentoring opportunities to be able to teach them the same things we've just been talking about: how to manage your finances, how to go find a job, how to apply for a job, how to dress when you apply for a job, where to go to apply for a job, where to look one up. I mean, frequently people get to 18, they're out of high school, and they're out on their own, and they don't have any of those life skills. And so those are the kind of things that we can offer and provide. And then the other thing is, look at this next to the last couple of items. Well, the last four actually. School supplies for the few that are going to college. Toiletries and hygiene bags are something that's welcome all the time for kids in these areas, whether they're in a shelter or whether they're in a foster home. And then support for caseworkers, as we've talked about, all kind of care bags. The other thing that we've discussed and was mentioned kind of sideways in some of the suggestions, and we're working on doing this, is adopting an elementary school where we can go in and get the clearances again to be able to go into the elementary school and do a birthday party for kids that are having birthdays. Take a little care package of snacks to a teacher who stands on his or her feet all day and may not get a chance to have a break. And they can have a snack package in their desk that they would be able to have between classes or something like that. Write them cards of encouragement and appreciation to let them know. The more and more, and we've got at least one teacher in the room or former teacher who can absolutely attest to the challenge and the difficulty that job is today. I think it's probably a lot harder than it was when I was in elementary school and junior high and high school, probably for most of us. And so there's all kind of folks who need encouragement and support. Yes, ma'am.
I'm new at this congregation, but because of where I work, every one of these is applicable to our older citizens in San Antonio. Whether they're not necessarily in nursing homes, but they can no longer do their own lawn. And because of where I work, and I give out resources all the time to older citizens, Forestville Church of Christ is on that list, where there's a lot of things that we go to Forestville Church of Christ to get filled. And I'm thinking, why can't that be Northside Church of Christ?
Which church is it?
Floresville.
Floresville, okay.
They're just on our list of resources.
Cool.
But I can't tell you how many older adults are in San Antonio that cannot do their lawn anymore, for whatever reason. And I keep thinking to them, well, do you know of any high schoolers in your area? Can you ask one of them to help you out? I always ask, can you go to your church and ask the youth group? But something like that could be very functional, very fast, to incorporate our teenagers even into providing some of these services. And I know I keep thinking, singing at nursing homes on a Sunday afternoon. Do you remember doing that when we were teenagers? We used to do that a lot. And the nursing home residents would love it, and so would their activities directors. But every one of these things is not only applicable to children, it's
Right.
also applicable to older adults.
Definitely. And thank you for that. I will tell you that it's helpful that you said you're fairly new here at Northside.
Yes, sir.
We had a seniors minister for many years, and we had a pretty robust program when he was here. And after he passed away unexpectedly, it lasted for quite a few more years. And we used to do things like that through our life groups. And our life group would go to one assisted living center on one Sunday night a month and put the Devo on and get to know those folks and visit with them. And there are assisted living centers all over this area. The one we went to was further down towards town, but we had other people who led singing. One guy sitting right behind you, in fact, would go with us, and he would lead singing because I can't sing. It's not that I don't sing, I can't. That's not my gift or capability. And so Rusty would go and lead singing. I could get up and talk, so I'd put the lesson on, and we had other people who would go, and a lot of that is just spending time with them, and we'd get to know them, and it was wonderful. And I really appreciate your input, because that's that many more. When you take, and this is something for all of us to think about, when you take one topic like that and you begin to unpack it, that's where you get all these little ideas of little steps that can be taken. And that gets us back to, don't look at the great big thing. Again, it's a no judgment zone. Don't look at the great big thing. Look at what are all the little pieces and steps and actions that need to be done to make something like that happen. Could I do any of them? Or better yet, which ones of them could I do to be able to do that? Just like we talked about the things that would need to happen to have an organization come in here and utilize our building. Those are the kind of things to be looking at. And so I really appreciate that. And if you would give me a minute after class, I would like to get a little bit more detail about that from you, because I'm compiling this and want to keep this list going as we go along to be able to provide to others. So,
Okay, Alan, can I ask you
yes.
a question? When I was helping with distribution of assets for Winston and for Helen, I was in charge of the Missional. And during the course of that activity, I ran into a guy who told me that if I ever needed to move a piano, he would do it for me, because he works on player pianos and he has a lift truck. So and he said that if I ever need to have a piano moved, now he wouldn't move it from the mother's house to the son's house, but I'm talking about in terms of donations, getting it where. Is there any list anywhere of people that we know? I mean, you know what I'm saying? That a lot of us probably have connections to people who maybe do cakes or flowers or nails or, and I'm just running them off. Is there any list? I mean, I know this, but I have to hear about it for me to get all that connection to work. You know what I'm saying?
I would say the answer to your question directly is no, not that I'm aware of. And I suspect
Tina might have
it doesn't exist like that, where we've got skill sets of people who are willing to donate a service of some sort if asked.
Yeah.
And I think it's a great idea that we put that together, and let me know. And I want to start adding these things, to give us more and more resources for the kinds of things that we can do. Because this is not just for the people sitting in this room, it's for the whole congregation. So the more we get those kinds of things together, we can begin to publicize that in put it up on the website and do things that point people here at Northside to ways they can become missional. It's for the whole congregation.
Another guy, this is many years ago, I was serving a church in Louisville, Kentucky. I had a guy in the church who'd been a plant manager all his life, MBA, all that. He became the muscle for the seniors when they had problems with debt collectors and people trying to, and he had no problem. He was a good Christian man, but he knew how to put pressure on because he'd done that all his life. And he was an awesome asset for the church, because if some senior was having problems, I'd send him over there. And he'd talk to him, and then he'd get things done, because he was okay with doing what it took to get things done. I don't think he turned the cheek off. But I'm just saying, there's lots of skills that people have that can help others that just can't do that. They just don't have an option or whatever. That's just an example of something that used to have a really neat ministry, but it's unusual.
It is interesting. And I don't think that it is not something that would be needed today either. I think there's plenty of opportunity for people to have an advocate, and I think that's probably the way to phrase that. And there would be people who would be happy to be the advocate for other people and do that. This is the kind of thing in developing, and of course now you get not just my brain, but I'm sure a few other folks in here is thinking about, well, how could we begin to put together a list like that and manage it and keep it up and make it, publicize it to where people would know to come and ask about it and look for it. So what other kind of things, now that we've talked about some of these and you've got that list in front of you and you've seen the suggestions and stuff that have come, what other suggestions or thoughts come to mind?
Alan, I think that we could, talking about putting this list together, Alexio, we
that may be the database that would allow us to do that. I'll check into it and find out, because that's one more question on my list for the office and for Jack. What kind of things can we do in way of organizing information, collecting information, and then making it available to the people that might need it when they do. Thank you very much. Mary.
Teaching the elderly or those who are not iPhone savvy how to use their iPhone or their Androids.
The youth would be really good at that. That's where I go. They think it was fun, quite frankly.
Went and picked up our pup from the groomer the other day, and the lady that owns the shop looks to be late 40s maybe. And I was asking her a question, and she had to get into the computer, and she starts looking at it, and a young woman who's one of the groomers comes out who's in her early 20s. And she struggles with it a little bit, and finally she turns to her and says, "Can you do this and do that?" She steps over and takes care of it. I thought, there's exactly what you're talking about, right? The skill set. And here's the other thing. I made a statement in here several weeks ago, and I think at the very first class, that we need to be sensitive when someone else is doing something to serve us. Sometimes that's because God needs them to do that, to bless them, and for them to learn what it is to serve. And we are being His instrument to help someone else when we don't let our pride get in the way, but we let somebody do something for us. And
Opportunity for ministry.
that's right.
Opportunity.
It works both directions. And that's exactly the kind of thing that young people almost universally are not as confident as we who have gotten into full adulthood are. We've learned to take some of the hard knocks and say, hey, you know what? I can do this. I can make it happen. I may not know exactly how, but I know I can figure out how. And young people don't always know that. It is sad to see that, where there's that lack of confidence and that lack of knowing that whatever happens, I can figure out how to get this problem solved. And so it can be immensely uplifting to a young person to be valued and to be recognized, and to know they're not invisible. And so these are the things. What else? Anybody else have a thought or a suggestion? Larry?
Well, it's just something I forgot when we were talking last week. It's a subset of the prison ministry on here.
Yes.
And that's Angel Tree. And I don't know if that's something that's known by that name in San Antonio. That's buying gifts for the Christmas gifts for the children of prisoners.
Oh, wow.
And it's very specific kinds of things. It's not like it's not like when you used to do the canned food drive when you were a kid and all the cans of artichoke hearts went to your school. It's more like 15-year-old size, large needs a jacket.
Right.
And you can also do that with foster kids too, because too often the donations that come in are baby clothes, little kids' clothes. All the teenagers get forgotten. There are kids my size, and nobody ever buys them anything because that's not at the thrift stores. It's also even sometimes hard to find at Walmart. You want to find a 3X, which used to be a 2X. It's not there. And then with COVID, there's limitations on, I've got this thing in my closet I've worn 3 times. Can't donate that again. So, but Angel Tree the Salvation Army may have a corner on that market, I don't know. But it was something that I know when I worked for social services in Arizona, that was something that organization, as a public organization, bought into for their workers to do donations, to do Angel Tree. And that was always Christmas, and with them it was prisoners, which also had foster kids.
Right.
And that's very specific. I mean, Christmas is less than 6 months away now. Scare you now. But something to be thinking of. It's once a year.
Yeah. Oh, that's interesting.
You know, I mean, I doubt that it ever would be a Walmart or somewhere like that.
HEBs probably would.
I suspect HEB makes large donations of things.
Oh, yeah.
Christmas time. Or like, we're here, we got 50 iPods.
Well, I don't know if you saw it on the news, but they donated $10 million to Uvalde to build a replacement for the school down there. Larry, we have done angel trees here, and Jeannie's going to tell us about it because she started to raise her hand a minute ago. How did when you said the little tags, I know that's how they do it here, but what do we do it for?
Now it benefits Fisher House.
Okay.
Families, yeah.
All right.
And it's gift cards. You get a tag and it tells you, whatever, where they want a gift card from.
Right. Okay.
We are doing an angel tree, but I mean.
Yeah.
So I remember, saying, okay, and there was a limit on, how much you spend at least this much, kind of a limit. And I remember being in Ross Dress for Less or something, looking for a jacket for a kid, and I ran into a guy that I knew that ran a group home. And I said, are kids into, I picked up, he says, are kids into this? He goes, no, they're probably into that. I said, okay. And so, I mean, those are the kids that are actually going to have the stuff that's maybe a brand name.
Yeah.
And of course, it needs to be something with an original tag.
Well, this lady that I mentioned that would do things with Child Protective Services would do stuff at the beginning of the school year in August every year. And all of us who knew her and were business associates, she would pick the phone up and call, and she would send us a list of all the things she needed, and mostly it was sneakers for teenagers, kids in junior high and high school that were not served quite as much as the little kids were. And so we'd buy a pair of sneakers and take them, and she'd have a whole truckload of them. Then she'd get somebody who had an SUV or a truck to come haul them all downtown to Child Protective Services in August to make sure that they had them. She put together a full range of things for back to school type stuff, just like that, but making sure she took care of the teenagers and everything as well with the kind of things that they would need. Yes, sir.
Kids that don't go to school today, but they need most of all, wonderful program. They should learn a trade. If you have a trade on the toolbox, you eat. I noticed that after the war in Germany, it was like, other people had gold, they bought gold and everything else. But they always needed something done because they almost found out they needed a beer shop. The people came with the toolbox. I'll pay you money. I'll put your money is water. Take a little piece of your coat. Like the plumber.
Yeah.
Doctor called the plumber. His sink was leaking. So he called the plumber fixed his sink. He said, how much is it? He said, $120. $120? You only been here 45 minutes. He said, I don't make that money, and I'm a doctor. He said, no, I didn't make that money either. I was a doctor.
If anybody's called a plumber recently or a heating and air person, you know about that.
Piggybacking on that, the school system, as I see it, my youngest just graduated 3 years ago, doesn't focus on trades. Because, even looking at that list, it says, then there's those kids that are going to college. Well, realistically, there are federal funds for some of those kids. There's scholarships, all kinds of stuff for kids aging out of the system going to college. Not enough money for them, but I don't know, there's enough money for my kids to go to college. But what my electrician was out the other day, and he said he's got enough work for 5 employees. He has 3. He's one of them, and one of them is his son. But he's got 3 employees, and he says kids say they don't want to work. Well, they've not been exposed to the fact that being an electrician is just as important as being a doctor or a social worker or a lawyer, because somebody has to keep their houses going and their businesses going. I don't know anything about, I know enough about electricity to know what not to do. And, because you get shot once, you learn fast.
Yeah.
And so they're just as important as what I did with kids, because they allow me to do what I need to do. But maybe folks can do some mentoring, and apprentice programs are around. But the kids know where they are. But folks that are plumbers, contractors, particularly contractors, because they know a range of things. The plumbers, contractors, electricians, and stuff, and do presentations within locally with users. Just say, hey, this could be interesting. You want to learn how to do it? Come talk to me.
Jim?
I would say that there's a few commercials around now where some of the trades are beginning to offer paid musicians to learn the trade. HVAC and plumbing, electrical, because there is not a pipeline of people coming up to fill those trade positions. And so they're beginning to offer kids and young people a way of getting in that trade to make money and to get a job and to learn that trade. And they're very valuable and they make good money.
My brother-in-law made more money than I did as a contractor.
Let me,
Definitely beginning to be advertised here locally in San Antonio, I don't know about other places.
But those are those kids.
That's something that we could begin to advertise here. That blank plumbing company is hiring, and they have an apprentice program, and you will learn the trade. Here's your phone number, and this HVAC company is doing that, and this electrical company is doing that. And for some of the kids.
And be more specific in terms of that list that's up there right now. Kids aging out of foster care.
Yeah.
Because they pretty much go out and, okay, here's your clothes. If I liked you as your foster parent, I'll give you a suitcase, but other than that, here's a garbage bag for your clothes.
Good luck.
Yeah, exactly.
let me get everybody to turn over to the last page and look at the back. It's just at the top. This was the rest of the suggestions that did not fall into the put things on in the building here. If you'll notice, these are the things that came. I took them directly from the sheets that were put together last week. The widows ministry, that kind of ties with what you were talking about just a minute ago. Serve in prison ministry, and I will tell you that one of our elders, Rod Cyrus, just does that. I don't know if he's still doing it, but he has many years of having served in a prison ministry. And in talking with him about it, listening to him about it, I should say, it seems like he wasn't doing it in part of an organized thing through a church he was a member of. He was just going and doing it on his own initiative. And so I put his name on there on purpose. If anybody's got an interest in that, talk to Rod Cyrus. Ask him, because he can probably tell you a lot about what's involved there. We have, many years ago here at Northside, had a prison ministry that a few people were involved in briefly. So we have, in fact, done that in an organized fashion. We talked about adopting an elementary school. Another suggestion that came in was provide lunches for workers on Habitat for Humanity or similar projects. One of the things I wanted to mention when we talked about the teenagers, and that is we have done almost every summer, our teens go down and do a work camp. And they worked with the Teens Give Back. I don't know if y'all remember, you weren't here at that class, but I showed a video that was on Channel 5 News. And they started off talking about, they were here in our building and filmed in the Loaves and Fishes folks putting together the bags to go down and do the food truck. And then they talked about Teens Give Back. And a number of our teens were wearing the green Teens Give Back, were part of that, connected with that group, that organization, and were out doing things for elderly people who own their own homes and couldn't maintain them. Our teens have gone out, all three of our kids did it several summers, they would go out and do a work camp, and they take them downtown to these lower income areas where there's elderly folks that just can't do their own stuff, and they'd paint houses and scrape them off and do all sorts of maintenance on the home and the yards and things like that to help them out. So there are other things that can be done that kind of are an outgrowth of that. One of the things is the San Antonio Hope Center, which is over on the near west side, I think. But they were originally started by Oak Hills Church. And they have stepped back from it now because it's a full-fledged 501c3 with a number of other churches that support them and other organizations and individuals that support them as a bona fide charity. And they provide, I don't know a lot about them, but they provide a number of services to people in lower income areas. I think so, Al.
Well, I volunteered here some years ago.
Okay.
But they originally gave out food bags.
Okay.
And they had all kinds of stuff. Sometimes they were giving out boxes of bananas, whatever they got, whatever they got donated. And they had classes, they had a Hispanic worship service that happened. You recognize the songs, I don't speak Spanish, but I kind of know what they were singing. And so I'm just saying, and they had a clothes closet for children, teens, and
Right.
adults, but I don't know what they're doing now. But it's on general over the body.
That's when we talk about where can I serve, that's another area that you can do. But then the other thing is suggestions that y'all made was to teach or lead classes on just basic life skills like we've been talking about. Not job skills necessarily, but basic life skills. How to live in the adult world, which is really fits especially the kids aging out of foster care, for instance. But then budgeting and personal finance and job search and coaching on how to get jobs. Good friend of ours, Judy Buss, a former member here, used to go downtown and work with Dress for Success organization. And they would go down and take women who were frequently homeless and living in other difficult situations financially, and they would do these kinds of things for them. They kept closets where they would, and Glenda, you can help me on this, I think they had closets down there where they had lots of various clothes, basic jewelry, and things like that that they could help them. Number one, they taught them how to dress at least professionally enough to go get a job and apply for a job, to wear socks, to what kind of attire to wear, what not to wear, and various things like that. And then they would help them and provide them with clothes. They would provide them with coaching and training on how to put together a basic resume to help them figure out, well, what skills do you have that you can offer, and what kinds of things might you go and apply for with the things you can do. And so there was that kind of stuff. The other thing that can be done that would be very beneficial, and the person to contact is me, working in the local outreach ministry, and that is looking on how many of y'all are familiar with the Nextdoor app? A few, okay. It is an app that is a neighborhood-focused app. We signed up, our homeowners association over here in Stone Oak sent it to us, and it was for our subdivision, not within Stone Oak, not Stone Oak Homeowners Association. And but then we get message, and it's a social media site. And unfortunately, like all social media, there are people on there that will get on there and criticize somebody who makes a post about something that's needed or some problem they see, and you just kind of have to let that go. But there are a lot of people who will say, I've seen some. My husband passed away last month. I'm looking at making changes. I'm new to the area. I'm looking for a church home. And it was gratifying that when I've seen some of those and responded to them, they'll have 86 answers already, before I ever even saw it. And so you see those kind of things. But finding out how to place notices and ads that are acceptable to their policies, where we can put out things and publicize the things that we're doing here, like these various groups. We get 2 or 3 newsletters that come like a newspaper thing, very thin, in the Stone Oak area ourselves. Almost every subdivision has those kind of things. So if you can gather those from your own area where you live and start making a list of how to contact those folks, that's some information that's very valuable that we can use in promoting things that we're going to be starting to do here based on these suggestions. Anybody else have anything? Thank you very much. We'll look forward to seeing you next week.